Today, our presenter is Clint Morris. I've watched Clint over the years conduct successful meetings, and I know of no one better to do this training for us today. And we so appreciate his willingness to share his knowledge and his experience with us. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Clint, take it away.
Thank you, Diane. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
So that everyone can see.
While you're pulling that up, Clint, one thing I forgot to mention to our participants, if you have questions, just raise your hand or type in the chat box and we'll make sure we get those answered.
So I want to make sure that are you seeing the presentation in the regular mode, or is it being displayed like it was earlier in the presenter view?
Yeah, actually, we're seeing your cover sheet, parliamentary procedure, the basics, and then we're all seeing about me.
Okay, so let's swap that.
There you go.
So I want to thank Diane and everyone for inviting me to come and speak to you all today. Parliamentary procedure is not a sexy topic, but it is something that I think is important when it comes to making sure that we have effective. And so I'm going to spend some time today going over some of the basics. So foundational, philosophical, and sort of some functional basics as well. Of course, there's no way that one training can address all the various things that could happen in a meeting. But I think after today, you should be able to leave with a basic understanding of how to structure conversation in a meeting in a way that will be fruitful for all those involved. So before we get into that, a little about me. So I live here in Lexington. I am from Henderson, so I was born and raised out in West Kentucky. I moved to Lexington in 2001 to attend Transylvania University, where I graduated in 2005 with my bachelor's in history. I went on to the University of Kentucky to get a master's in history. After that, I have not used either of those degrees professionally, but I think they were important in establishing, an ability to think critically and to view the world in a way that is helpful. For the past 6 years, I've been the Human Resources Manager at Lexington Habitat for Humanity, which is probably the best job that I've ever had and will ever have. We spend our time every day bringing people together to build homes, community, and hope. And it's a great organization to work for. The reason why I am talking about this particular topic, over the past 20 years or so, I've presided over meetings, conventions, or committees on local, state, regional, national, and international levels. So everything from a committee of 5 folks to a convention of upwards of 500 or 600 individuals. I have, like many of you, have been in that presiding officer's chair and recognize the importance of making sure that rules are followed so that the outcomes of these meetings be basically to the will of the general membership, and making sure that things move along smoothly. My passion for this sort of thing began in 1999 when I was a congressional page. I spent my junior year of high school living in Washington and was a page for the United States House of Representatives. I kind of fell in love at that point with all things government and civics, and that was where sort of the passion began. So as we move forward, a lot of this stuff will be pretty self-explanatory. It'll be foundational. If you do have questions, I will sort of pause at moments to see if you have questions, but also make sure you ask your questions in the chat box, and then Diane will let me know as those come up and we can address them. So let's talk about the objectives for today. So there are 6 main objectives. The first will be to understand the foundations of parliamentary procedure. What is it? Why is it important? What are the purposes and the goals? Then we'll go through and we'll review some basic definitions. Anytime you're running a meeting that's using parliamentary procedure, there are certain words that are used, things that we hear. So we'll talk a little bit about what those mean and give you an understanding of that. We'll talk about the purpose of motions. So, the types of motions. We have main, subsidiary, privileged, incidental, and how you use those as a member to get what you want, and how you deal with those as a presiding officer. we're going to go over what I call the Robert's Rules cheat sheet. And when I send this presentation to Diane afterwards, I will include a copy of the cheat sheet. You all have that for future reference. If I have mine in front of me, I use it every time I preside over a meeting as a quick, handy reference. And it's a great tool. We'll go over some quick tips to remember, and then we will go over some frequently asked questions, and I'll open it up to any questions that you all might have as well. So, the foundations. What is parliamentary procedure? And basically, it is a set of rules governing the orderly, expeditious, and efficient transaction of business during a meeting. A lot of people are intimidated by parliamentary procedure, but that shouldn't be the case. It really does provide a framework or a roadmap to ensure participation and that everyone has access to the decision-making process. So we have to remember that parliamentary procedure is a tool, and the rules themselves are not the goal. Your meetings have different goals, right? You have business you need to conduct, things that you need to discuss, decisions that need to be made. Parliamentary procedure is not the goal, it is the tool. And a lot of times people use it to sort of outmaneuver other folks or to score wins. And that's really outside of the spirit of why the rules exist. You know, the procedures exist to empower members and to promote participation. And we'll talk a little bit about the foundations of that here in a little bit, but I included a picture of Henry M. Robert, who's probably the most famous American parliamentarian because he wrote Robert's Rules of Order. At the bottom, and he said, "The assembly meets to transact business, not to have members exploit their knowledge of parliamentary law. A business meeting is not a class in parliamentary law." So that just kind of goes back to that idea of if you have one person in a meeting that is knowledgeable of this and they're running ramshot over everyone else, that's not really the purpose of it. The purpose is to make everything accessible to everyone and to ensure that all the members of the meeting, that their rights are upheld and they have access to the decision-making process. So why is it important? We'll just go over this really quickly. So parliamentary procedure provides for the following expectations when conducting a meeting. So the first is that all members have equal rights. So if there's a member of either a board or an assembly or the fiscal court, whatever it is, every member there and present has the same rights as everyone else. Parliamentary procedure makes sure that that is enforced, and it makes sure that those who can participate are allowed to participate. Parliamentary procedure is important because it protects the rights for people who have minority viewpoints on particular issues to be heard. So it provides for debate, it provides for dissent, and it gives them an opportunity to express their opinion. Parliamentary procedure is important because full and free discussion is an essential right, sort of embedded in the rules. The use of parliamentary procedure allows for the simplest and most direct approach at dealing with any particular issue or topic. One thing that's important, I think most meetings get off track when they're not using the procedure to ensure that only one question is considered at a time. I don't know if you've been in a meeting, but I have been in several meetings where we have one topic that is being discussed, and before that is resolved, all of a sudden you have A on the table, and then you're talking about X, Y, and Z within minutes, and no one knows what's going on or what matters being considered. Proper use of parliamentary procedure will help you avoid that situation where we're only considering one motion at a time. Everyone's on the same page, and that way, everyone's rights to be heard, are ensured. Members also, through parliamentary procedure, have the right to know what question is before the committee or the group and what an affirmative and a negative vote means. Again, I'm sure we've all been in meetings where you're considering the topic, it's pretty complex, it's time to vote. Half of the people don't know what it means to vote yay, half don't know what it means to vote nay. That generally happens when parliamentary procedure is not followed and everyone is unclear about what the actual outcomes are, what the actual topic is. And so making sure that as a presiding officer, you keep a comfortable pace, that you allow individuals to express the intent of the things that they're trying to do, and that everyone's on the same page. And I think what I think is important about parliamentary procedure, and hopefully you will see this when after this training is concluded, is that it really does provide a logical framework for ordering discussion, for making sure that what is being discussed is done so in a way that makes sense, that is logical, rooted in common sense, and that everyone's on the same page with. So this, I love this quotation because I think if you break it down, you will see that there are varying experiences we've all had in different groups that this was not the case. So I'm going to break this down, but this is a really good statement on the goal of parliamentary procedure. So the use of parliamentary procedure should enable the committee to arrive at the general will, so what the majority wants, of the maximum number of questions, so the most efficient use of our time, of varying levels of complexity. So some things that are very easy to deal with, like approving the minutes, other things that may be very complex in their nature, like approving a budget. It shouldn't matter the complexity. In a minimum amount of time, so we are being efficient, and this is my favorite part, and under varying internal climates, ranging from an organization where there is total harmony, where everyone gets along, everyone views the world in the same way, and business just flows, or impassioned division of opinion. So if you have a group that feel passionate about things in very different ways, that shouldn't matter. If parliamentary procedure is used correctly, you should be able to get to the general will, so the consensus of the group, on the maximum number of questions, regardless of how complex, in the quickest way possible under those various circumstances. So I just think that's great. If there's one thing you can do, take away from this presentation, it would be to print this slide and read that every time you are about to preside over a meeting, to ground yourself in the goal of parliamentary procedure. So any questions before we jump into anything else?
I'm not seeing any, Clint, so you're being very clear.
Okay, great. So let's go over some basic definitions that everyone who's involved in a meeting, whether that be the PTA, or that is a church committee, or a governmental committee, that there are certain things that everyone just needs to be aware of. And I've put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those things on the screen. There are a lot more, but I think these are the basics. So the first is the quorum. So what is the number of members present needed to conduct business? And that should be listed in your organizational's governing documents. So whether it is, if it's a fiscal court, that should be established by statute. If it's a professional organization that you belong to, quorum should be established by your bylaws or your charter. But it is important that the organization have a quorum, because that basically is what the organization values as the number of people needed to conduct business. If you have an organization, a committee that has 10 members, and you have 4 members present, and those 4 members are making decisions, so 40% of the organization is making decisions for 100%, and it really could be, if you think about it, upwards of 20% making those decisions. That isn't a pretty good expression of the general will of the membership. So a quorum gets the organization to what the minimum threshold should be for representing the will of the organization. So that is a quorum. The majority is the threshold that's needed to pass a motion or to express the general will of the membership. A simple majority is over one half of the members. So if you have a membership of 10, and you have 6 individuals vote in the affirmative, then the affirmative has the majority. Um, it has to be over half. So if you have a vote that's 50-50, no majority is established. There are times that both Robert's rules and your organization's governing documents may require a larger percentage, so either a 2/3 or a 3/4 majority. And if you're the presiding officer, that is something that you should be aware of, is what the threshold is needed for a particular motion to pass to reach that majority. And it's a best practice before any vote is taken in a situation where there is a larger threshold, for that to be announced before the vote is taken, that all members are clear on what the outcome can be and what is required for either passage or for passage of a motion. A motion is simply a proposal by a member for the group to take a particular action. And we'll talk about what the 4 general types of motions are here in a minute, but it is how the business is conducted. I put on here bylaws or charter or constitution. Those are the governing documents that have the ultimate authority on the procedure for your organization. And so, if, like I said, if it's a fiscal court, there are things that the Kentucky Revised Statutes would say you have to do or not do. If it's a professional organization, you will have a bylaws or a constitution that provide structure. A lot of organizations say that anything that's not listed in the governing documents is then listed by the latest edition of Robert's Rules or some other manual. So knowing that is important as well, but nothing within Robert's Rules or nothing within sort of basic parliamentary procedure can supersede anything that is outlined in your governing documents. So in most cases, it takes a simple majority to approve the minutes of the last meeting. If for some reason your governing documents say that has to be a 2/3 majority, then that would supersede the requirements of the parliamentary authority. So Robert's Rules or one of the other authorities. So that's just something to be aware of. And the last thing is members. When we talk about members, the rights and privileges afforded in parliamentary procedure belong to bona fide members of the organization. And that should be defined by your governing documents as well. So again, if you're a fiscal court, then the members are the elected members of that court. If you're a professional organization, for most situations, it is the dues paying members. If you're some sort of other organization that has a representative structure, it's generally those who have been elected by another layer of membership to set on an executive committee or some other body within the organization. But it's important to know who is a member, how that is defined, and recognize that the rights and privileges are afforded to them only. So, if you're a school board member and you're conducting a school board meeting, and a parent stands up and makes a statement and then offers a motion, the parent has no right or privilege to offer a motion because they are not an actual member of that body, if that makes sense. So making sure that you're aware of that is important. Any questions about these particular?
I see none.
Moving on, let's talk about motions. And this is sort of the meat and potatoes of parliamentary procedure. This is how things get done in a meeting. And so during a meeting, a body, a committee, an assembly can only consider one motion at a time. If subsequent motions are offered, so amendments, privileges, etc., they must be resolved before returning to the previous matter. So let's talk about sort of the basic motion process. So you are a member of an organization. During a meeting, there's something you would like for that body to do or discuss. So you obtain recognition from the presiding officer. Once you are recognized, you state the motion, the thing that you want the committee to do. If another member seconds the motion, which is they're saying they are agreeing that the topic should be discussed, then the discussion of the motion can move forward. The chair would then restate the motion, and that's important. For those of you who are presiding officers, that is so important that the chair restate the motion so that everyone is on the same page. People may have written it down differently or heard it differently. The chair may have heard it incorrectly. So restating what the motion is gives the original person who made the motion the chance to say, nope, that's not exactly what I said. What I said was blank, so that everyone's on the same page. At that point, you go into debate. So simple pro-con of who agrees with the motion, who thinks it should be passed, who doesn't. And then a vote is taken on the motion and the chair announces the results. That is the basic process of how it's supposed to work. There are often times that this goes off the rails somewhere within this, and a lot of times it's during the debate. People get off topic. People try to offer other motions incorrectly. Other motions, so subsidiary motions are offered, and then everyone forgets where we are. Are we talking about the main motion? Are we talking about the amendment? It can get confusing. So one of the tips that I have for those of you who are presiding over any sort of meeting is, one, make sure you have a notepad with you so that you're writing the things down as they are happening. So if you are the chair and someone makes a motion, write the motion down, restate the motion, confirm that you have it correctly, and then sort of keep an eye on the discussion as it moves forward. If an amendment is made, then write the amendment underneath the motion that you wrote on your notepad. So you know that, okay, we have moved to a subsidiary motion, and that needs to be disposed of before we can go back to the main motion. So just keeping a notepad with sort of the flow of the motions that are being made will be very helpful. If your organization has a secretary, the secretary should be doing this. A lot of organizations get into the weeds when they're having their secretaries keep track of the debate that is happening on a motion. Generally, that is not required by Robert's rules or governing documents. The secretary really only needs to be recording the business that is being conducted. So if the secretary is recording that a motion was made, and then an amendment was made, and if it was supported or not, the secretary should have a pretty good idea of where you are in the conversation, what should be disposed of first, what is in order. So that's just something to think about when you're appointing individuals to serve in roles like secretary or a recorder in the during the meeting. Any questions about?
Clint, we actually do have a question.
Okay.
Commissioner Bartleman asked, what is the proper motion to delay a vote on an agenda item?
Okay, so
can you just move to pass over, or do you have to make a motion to delay until a time certain?
Okay, so there are two ways to do it. If your goal is to just delay it, so you do want to have the conversation, you do want to have the vote, then you just move to postpone until and then give a particular time. So let's say we are talking about motion A, and I think we don't have enough information and I want to postpone that to the next meeting, or I want to postpone that until the end of the meeting, that I would move that we postpone consideration of this motion until blank. If that is seconded and everyone agrees and it passes with a simple majority, then that motion will be moved to that time when it would be appropriate. If you want to postpone it indefinitely, you would simply make a motion to table the motion. It can be brought off of the table later, but if you think that this is something you would want to delay until some other time in the future, you could do it that way. Another thing that you can do is you could move to it for it to be referred to a committee. If you're wanting to delay it because you don't think there's enough information or more attention should be considered to whether it should be supported, referring a motion to a committee is a good way to get at that as well. All of those are subsidiary motions, which we'll go over here in a minute, and they should be brought forward when you've been recognized by the chair during discussion on the main motion. So you can't interrupt a speaker to move for the debate or the vote to be postponed, but you can make that motion when you have been recognized and have the floor.
Okay, Clint, and we have a follow-up question to what you just discussed. Is a motion to delay until a time certain debatable?
Let me look. I'm going to make sure it is debatable. Yeah. So it's a subsidiary motion. It requires a second. It is debatable. It is amendable. So if you say until, let's say you're at a conference and you said, let's move this till 5 o'clock. During the debate, someone can amend that to 6, or they can amend that to another time. And then it simply takes a majority vote.
Okay, and some clarification, to table a vote is often used, but does table have to be picked up off the table per se by the end of that meeting?
It should be by the end of that meeting. In the next meeting, I mean, it could be, but in the next meeting, depends on what your governing structure says. In the next meeting, it can be brought off the table, or it would just be a new motion. So tabling a motion does not dispose of the issue. So if you presented a motion and it was defeated, then that has been disposed of. Tabling a motion basically indefinitely postpones consideration. So you haven't disposed of the motion.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, let's go. Let's talk about the 4 types. We have main motions, which bring business for consideration before the committee. A main motion can only be made when there is no other motion pending. And we'll go through what an example of that situation might be. Subsidiary motions assist the committee, and I'm just going to use committee to make it easier as we move forward. So assist the committee to consider or disposing of a main motion. Or sometimes some other types of motions. So subsidiaries are amendments and those sorts of things. Privileged motions do not relate to the main motion, but to a special matter of immediate or overriding importance. And we'll talk about what that looks like here in a minute. And then incidental motions deal with questions of procedure and are handled, I should say handled instead of handed, when they occur. So let's go through and talk about what these different motions look like. So a main motion you would make if you wish the committee to do something, you offer a motion. So an example would be, I move that the committee purchases a Lamborghini. If another member seconds this motion, so they are agreeing that they believe the committee should consider the motion, then the question of whether to purchase a Lamborghini moves forward for debate. This is pretty straightforward. People oftentimes are confused about what a second means. If you are seconding a motion, you are not obliged to vote in favor of the motion. You are simply saying to the rest of the assembly, I believe that this motion warrants consideration. So just be mindful of that. You can second a motion you maybe don't agree with and plan to vote down. And there are several reasons why you would want to do that. One, if you just think that it's something that the committee should consider, that it's important. And the second would be if this is something that you really are opposed to, if it's a topic, you can go ahead and have it disposed of by seconding the motion, allowing for debate, then advocating for its defeat. So it is a way to strategically dispose of something that you are opposed to. If there is no second to a motion, the motion fails. And so that happens from time to time. And as if you're a presiding officer, is you simply restate the motion. You ask if there's a second. If no one seconds the motion, best practice would generally, ask a couple times, is there a second? I'm not hearing a second. Is there a second? And then say, hearing no second, motion fails due to lack of second. And motion fails at that point. Main motions are pretty straightforward. They occur when there's no other business at hand. So in new business, or if it's part of old business, it's when there's nothing on the floor that the committee has to make a decision on at the moment, would be the proper time to bring forward a new main motion.
Clint, can you make a motion to remove an item from the agenda without an up or down vote?
What do you mean without an up or down vote? If you're moving to amend the agenda
without voting without voting the item up or down. Bill, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, can you make a motion if there's an item on the agenda that the motion was made and seconded, it's being debated, and then you decide you don't want to vote on it, can you just make a motion to remove the item from the agenda if you don't want to vote yes or no on it?
So if the main motion has been made, then it needs to be disposed of or tabled. So that's to remove it from the agenda. What you would do is just motion to table it.
Okay.
Like I said, once the motion has been made and seconded, then it needs to you can't just pause and say, okay, well, this is no longer on the agenda. You have to dispose of it in some way. And I would suggest at that point tabling it or
Okay.
postponing it till another time.
Thank you.
Yep. Now, if it's on an agenda and the motion has not been made, but let's say the presiding officer has given a detailed agenda that says at this point we are talking about this topic or considering this old business, before it's been put on the floor, you can amend the agenda at that time just to remove it from the agenda if it has not been placed on the floor for consideration yet.
Okay, well, let me expand on that a little bit. If we had an issue regarding mandatory COVID testing and shots for our employees, at one meeting we voted to pass over it. It came up the next meeting, and it was on the agenda again. Would we have to bring it to the floor, or at that point, could we just vote to remove it from the agenda, or do we have to table it?
So if no action was taken in the first meeting and it's on the agenda for the second meeting as old business, I would assume you at the beginning of the meeting you can vote to remove it from the agenda.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah. The presiding officer will put the agenda together. A lot of organizations don't take the first vote to approve the agenda, but really it should. Like, the body controls the agenda, even though the presiding officer will present an agenda, and generally bodies give the presiding officer the authority to create the agenda. The will of the people in the room should determine what is on the agenda. And if they just say, okay, there's this thing that's later in the meeting that we don't want to discuss, they can move to remove it from the agenda. Unless, this is where it gets complicated. Unless when it was disposed of in the previous meeting, the vote of the body was to place it on the agenda for consideration. If it was just disposed of or no action was taken and it showed up on the agenda, but if the body moved it to that time, then it will need to be disposed of in the meeting that it was set for, because the body did say we will consider it at this time on this date. Good question. Okay, there we go. Subsidiary motions. This is where things get in the weeds with a lot of organizations. So subsidiary motions generally help the committee in disposing of a main motion. So subsidiary motions could be an amendment to the main motion. It could be to refer the main motion to committee. It could be to postpone consideration to a different time or indefinitely. It could be to limit or extend the time of the debate of the motion. Or it could just be to end debate and go towards the vote. All of those are subsidiary motions. And debate is allowed on some of them and debate is not allowed on others. And I'm going to go through some subsidiary motion examples and kind of give you a sense of what is needed. So if you're going to move to table something, so you're going to suspend consideration, that you cannot interrupt the speaker to do that. So when you have the floor, it does require a second, and it is not debatable, and it is not amendable, and you need a simple majority to table a motion. To end debate, so let's say it's gone back and forth, people are starting to repeat the same arguments, you're not hearing anything new, so it may be time to vote. You would simply move the previous question. So that is, again, cannot interrupt the speaker. You have to obtain the floor to do that. It does require a second. Again, it is not debatable. It is not amendable, and you need a 2/3 vote to do that. And that's a pretty high threshold, but if 2/3 of the members are saying, yeah, we've talked about this enough, it's time to vote, then that goes back to the purpose of parliamentary procedure, to make sure that you are timely and the general will of the members are expressed. So that is a subsidiary motion. To consider to postpone it until a different time. We talked about this earlier. Again, you cannot interrupt someone. It requires a second. It is debatable. It is amendable, and it just needs a majority vote. And then the most often used secondary motion, subsidiary motion, I would think is to amend the main motion. Again, you can't, interrupt a speaker to do that, but if you have been recognized by the chair, that you can make this a motion to amend. It does require a second. It is debatable. It is amendable, and it generally takes just a majority vote to pass. So, again, you all will get a copy of the cheat sheet that has all of that information when we distribute the presentation. So, moving on, we have privileged motions. So a member can offer a privileged motion if they believe there is a matter of importance that should be considered immediately. This could include a motion to recess, a motion to adjourn, to fix a time for adjourning, to raise points about comfort, accessibility, or safety. Some of these require simple rulings of the chair. Some require a vote of the committee, but these should be taken, should be done rarely and when it is important. So can anyone think of a reason why you would automatically, right in the middle of the meeting, make a motion to adjourn? Some people would use it in order to kill the business, right? They don't like what's happening. They make a motion to adjourn so that hopefully maybe they'll just kill the business and the meeting will be over. That is not within the spirit of what it is there for. A motion to adjourn during the middle of a meeting would generally be because there's some sort of concern for safety or time. Let's say you're having a meeting tomorrow afternoon and you look outside and the freezing rain is coming down. There's already a half an inch of ice on the branches. It would then be appropriate to move that you adjourn so that you all can get home safely. The same with recess, the same with setting a fixed time for adjournment. If it looks like you have a bunch of things on the agenda, but you all really only have 2 hours to conduct the meeting, and you're already at the hour mark, and you've only considered 2 of the things, of the 18 items on the agenda, and you can't be there all night, then that would be a good time to fix a time for adjournment. One, that means that it's respecting the time of the members, but it also puts a lot of pressure on the chair to make sure that they're keeping the conversation moving in an efficient and effective way. So let's talk about some of these privileged motions. Like I said, a motion to adjourn, you simply say you move that we adjourn. You can't interrupt the speaker. It does need a second. It is not debatable. It is not amendable, and it just needs a majority. A move to recess, again, you can't interrupt the speaker, but when you have been recognized, it does need a second. It's not debatable, but it is amendable. So if you say you want to recess until 5 o'clock, it can be amended to 5:30. It simply needs a majority vote. A point of privilege, you would make that if you want to say, something to the chair, point of privilege, can we turn the temperature down? It's 82 degrees in here. Or can we turn the microphone up, or can we ask everyone to be quiet? Those sorts of things are about your comfort as a member and being able to be in the room and conduct the business. You can interrupt the speaker for that. It does not require a second. It's not amendable. It's not debatable. And the rule, it is not a vote. The chair decides those sorts of points. The same with a point of order. So if you're objecting to someone because you think they're being offensive, or they've called you a name, or they're generally, being jerk or untruthful, you can call for a point of order. That's a privileged motion. You can't interrupt the speaker. It doesn't require a second. It doesn't require debate. It doesn't require an amendment, and the chair would make the decision on that. The other privileged motion I have in my list here is, a request for information, and that's a really important sort of a point of information. If you're trying to make a decision and you don't quite understand what's going on, or the topic or some of the information that's been presented, you have a right to ask for that information, and you can interrupt the speaker. Again, it doesn't need a second. It doesn't need debate or amending. And there actually is no ruling by the chair or the body. The individual that has the floor that you're directing the point of information to, should answer that in a way that, satisfies your need as a fellow member of the organization. Okay, so let's go on to incidental motions. So you can offer an incidental motion to deal with questions of procedure. So raising a point of order, I listed that earlier as a privileged motion. It's also an incidental motion, sort of for violations of a rule. So if the body has just voted on something that was not the main motion, you can raise a point of order and say, we have this subsidiary motion here that we should be considering, but we just voted on this main motion without considering the first motion or the subsidiary motion that was amended and seconded. Raise a point of order. It's a good time for everyone to take a break, talk about where we are, get back on track. Points of parliamentary inquiry. So if you have a question about what it is that, or how you should go about doing what you want to do, it is totally fine to seek recognition from the chair and say to the chair, okay, I understand that we have this motion. I would like to amend that. How do I do that? And the chair should be willing to provide you with information on how you should move forward with making either your amendment or your point of any sort of other incidental motion you would like to make. So simply asking for a point of parliamentary inquiry. Incidental motions would also be motions to suspend the rules. So that should be done lightly. If there's a reason the body agrees that, okay, we have this one rule in place that we don't need to follow right now, you can suspend the rules, I believe with a 2/3 vote, and move forward. Division of the committee. So if the chair has conducted a voice vote of the ayes and nays and has declared that the ayes have it, you don't believe that is true, or you think that this vote should be recorded, you can ask for division of the committee, at which point they would need to go through a non-voice vote, which could be a standing raising of hands or a roll call. And then, of course, the last incidental motion that most people make would be to appeal the ruling of the chair. So if the chair has ruled on a point of privilege or another incidental motion and you disagree and think that the chair has either violated the rules or in some way has done something that the body doesn't agree with, you can appeal the ruling of the chair, which would then need to be disposed of by the committee. Any questions about incidental motions? So let's talk. So the voting on the ruling of the chair, you can interrupt the speaker. It does require a second. It is debatable. It simply takes a majority vote to overrule the presiding officer. To consider something out of schedule, so to suspend the rules, this kind of goes back, Bill, what you were talking earlier, to move things around on the agenda. If you, as an organization, has started the meeting by approving the agenda, and then halfway through you realize, okay, well, we can't consider this item until we consider this other item, you can vote to suspend the rules and move things around on the agenda. Can't interrupt the speaker. It does take a second for that, and it takes a 2/3 vote to suspend the rules. Let's see here. Again, a voice vote. If you want to call for division, you simply need to call for division. It's not debatable. It doesn't need a second. And the chair would then respect that right that you have as a member of the assembly to have the vote recorded in a different way. So, okay, this is the cheat sheet I was talking to you all about, and you all will get a copy of it. Like I said, I have mine with me right here. I use it all of the time. I don't go into a meeting without it, and it has the various different things that you want to do. So to adjourn, what you need to say, if you can interrupt the speaker, if it needs a second, if it's debatable, if it's amendable, and then the vote threshold that is needed. So if you are a member of an organization that has to use parliamentary procedure, you should print this out for yourself. If you are a presiding officer, you should have a copy of this with you at all times to make sure that you're doing things the way that the procedure requires. Another thing, when I talk to folks about presiding over a meeting, it's okay if you're the presiding officer to say, let me check that. I think one, it creates a trust with the membership that you're trying to do the thing that needs to be done correctly. These things can get confusing, and I think it lays a foundation for everyone to recognize, okay, it is okay for us to pause for a moment to look up the right way to do something and then move forward the correct way instead of moving forward the incorrect way and then having to backtrack and rechange things or things getting confused. Making sure that you take your time, that you reference this. If you have a copy of Robert's rules, that you're referencing that. I think that's really important as a presiding officer.
Clint, we have a question. Well, first I want to answer Bill's question. Bill Bartleman had asked if we could email him the cheat sheet, and yes, Bill, we will, absolutely. Following this, Clint has shared his PowerPoint presentation. So as always, we'll be sharing that along with this recording, and that includes the cheat sheet. But Clint, we do have a question. When an executive session is on the agenda, can the chair call for the executive session, or is a motion needed to go into executive session?
Okay, so if the body has approved the agenda at the beginning of the meeting, then the chair can then declare that we're at that point in the meeting where we're going into an executive session, because the body has approved it at the beginning of the meeting. Then I would think no motion is required. If the agenda has not been approved by the body, and if you're just going through an agenda, so a tentative agenda that the chair suggested, then you would need to take to make a motion for the body to go into executive session.
Okay, Frida, did that answer your question? Well, apparently it did. And Bill has a comment. I think for government agencies, you have to make a motion and state the reason for the executive session as it applies to the law. So
that goes back to if your governing documents require a different thing, then yeah, that's what you would follow.
Okay.
It's one of those situations where you erring on the side of like being more formal of things is always a good way to err. So let's say you've approved the agenda, but you're getting to it. Well, it's okay to go ahead and consider the motion to go into it, even if you feel like it's already been dealt with. Like, it's one of those things where you're just making things clear about why you're doing the things that you're doing, so that everyone's on the same page. So that that's totally fine.
And Bill made a point that is a requirement of the open meetings law. Thank you, Bill.
So let's go through some quick tips, and then we'll have a few minutes if there are any other questions. So here's some things to remember. So the chair has the authority to recognize members to speak, with the exceptions of points of order or privilege or a few other actions which are on the cheat sheet. No member should interrupt another member who has been recognized to speak unless the rules allow for interruption. That is an important part, I think, of running an efficient meeting. If someone has been recognized by the chair, they have the floor, allowing them to finish what they're saying and get their entire statement out or their position out without interruption, a lot of times will help avoid confusion. When you have crosstalk, is when people get confused about who said what's going on. So being mindful of that and being respectful of who has the floor. There's a flip side to that, though. If you have the floor, you should be respectful and mindful of everyone else's time as well. And you should make sure that your statements are, about the matter at hand, that are concise, that you're not repeating yourself, and that, like I said, you're respectful of the fact that other people would like to maybe join in the conversation. So it's about being respectful on both sides. If you are chairing a meeting, and you've noticed that maybe someone is abusing the time, they've been recognized, they have the floor, but this is the fourth time they're about to say the exact same thing that they just said, you have the authority as the chair to then remove their right to speak and move on with someone else. I've had to do it many times where you thank the member for what they've said, but we are now getting to territory where the same things are being repeated. Let's give someone else a chance to speak on the motion. So, as the chair, you have to referee those sorts of things, whether if someone's trying to interrupt or if someone's spending too much time. All members should address the chair when speaking. I know that's awkward, particularly if you have a small assembly, but it's done so that no one feels like there's a personal attack or that your position on any particular thing is because of another member of the assembly. It's basically making sure that everything is done consistently, and so it's just a matter of sort of respecting the organization. And again, like I said, all members should respect one another and refrain from personal attacks and crossover talk and interrupting each other. If you are confused about what motion is being considered, what an affirmative or negative vote would mean, how to offer a motion, and I mentioned this earlier, please seek recognition from the chair and raise a point of parliamentary inquiry. Parliamentary procedures should never be prohibitive to participation. Just because you don't know the right words to say should not prohibit you. You should ask for assistance and either the chair, or if you have a parliamentary authority or you have a bylaws chair or someone in the organization that has that information, they should be willing to provide that to you so that you can participate fully. If you don't know what's going on in a meeting, there's a high chance that other people in the meeting also don't know what's going on. And that's how meetings unravel, is when people are trying to guess about what's being considered and it gets all over the place. So members with majority opinions on a matter have the right to be heard, with minority opinions on the matter have a right to be heard. That is foundational to a parliamentary procedure. But likewise, the majority of members have the right to dispose of a matter as they see fit within the bounds of the procedure. So rejecting a motion, referring a matter to committee, postponing or tabling a matter is important as well. And if you're a presiding officer, you have to make sure you're striking that balance between allowing people with minority opinions on a particular issue access and opportunity to speak, but also protecting the rights of the committee itself, the majority of the committee, to do what it wants to do. So here's some frequently asked questions. You say, I think the committee should reconsider a matter that has already been disposed of. What can I do? Well, you can move that the committee reconsider the previously disposed matter if it's in the same meeting and you voted on the prevailing side. So earlier we had the motion to buy a Lamborghini. Let's say I voted yes, we should. 30 minutes later in the meeting, I think, oh no, that's not a great idea. It should have been this other type of car. I can move that we reconsider if it's in the same meeting and that I voted in the prevailing side. If I had voted no on the original motion, then I could not bring forward a motion to reconsider. But if I did vote with the prevailing side, then I would have the right to bring that forward. Do you have to be in favor of a motion to make it? Yes. If you are making a motion, you are asking the body to do something, you should be of the opinion that that motion should pass. You are basically saying to the assembly, you believe this should be done by making the motion. Now, if in the course of the debate you change your opinion, then you should withdraw the motion or amend it, or support someone else's amendment of it. But you do not have to support a motion to second it. I mentioned that earlier. Seconding a motion only indicates that you believe the matter is important enough for consideration. I think I got a couple more of these frequently asked questions. We just voted by voice, but I disagree with the chair's determination of the outcome. What can I do? Again, this is simple. You simply declare, after the chair has declared the division of this, the results of the vote, you can call for division of the assembly. Clearly, usually just by saying out loud division. If the chair hears that you have called for division, the chair will then ask the members to vote, usually by a show of hands is the next thing. People will raise their hands. The chair will scan the audience and say the ayes have it, the noes have it. There doesn't have to be a count of the raise of hands. The chair can just look and see if there's an obvious majority. If there is no count and you still disagree with the outcome, call for division again. At that point, a counted vote would need to happen. So it could still be raising of hands with tellers who are counting. It could be a roll call. It could be a physical division of the room, which is where the word division comes from. Assembly is used to, everyone would get up and they would move to one side of the room, which meant yes, one side of the room, which meant no. That's where that comes from. It's an old parliamentary from the United Kingdom. That's how they vote on matters. They go to different sides of the chamber, well, through the hallway to be counted. Let's say you did. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, we need some clarification here. So are you saying that it is improper to support a motion to consider if your only motive is to bring it to the floor for discussion?
Yes, you should not make a motion. It is improper to make a motion that you do not agree with.
Okay.
Yeah. Now you can second it if you think it should just be for consideration, but it would be improper for you to move anything that you are not agreeable to the outcome of that.
That's interesting. I certainly, I was not aware of that. That makes sense. Thank you.
It's the same thing oftentimes, and this is debatable, but when you're making nominations for something, if you are nominating an individual, you are declaring your intent to support that individual in that position. It's the same sort of thing. Like if you're making a motion, because here's the thing, you make a motion and you start the ball rolling on some sort of action that you don't agree with, and you could wind up with that action happening. So it is definitely improper. So let's say you disagree with the ruling of the chair. What can you do? You simply raise a point of order. You announce that you appeal the ruling of the chair. If there is a second, then the appeal can be debated and considered. Then the committee would then vote on whether or not to affirm the decision of the chair by a majority of vote. So that one is important, that you're very clear with members about what a yes vote and what a no vote means. Some organizations, if you appeal the ruling of the chair, you're moving that the chair be overturned. Then you would be voting yes to overturn the chair and no not to. Some organizations will phrase it to where you're voting to affirm the chair's decision. So a yes would be to affirm the decision of the chair. A no would be to overturn it. So if you're the presiding officer, it's very clear on those sorts of things. You need to be very clear about what a yes means, what a no means. Either way is fine. It's just as long as everyone is clear about what the outcomes are. And then it says here, it looks like a rule from our governing document is in contrast with Robert's rules, which should be followed. And of course, at that point, it is the governing document. So the example we had earlier about what is required to go into executive session, if you're a fiscal court, the statutes are your governing documents. If it requires one particular thing, one type of way of going to the executive session, then that should be followed. That would supersede anything that normal parliamentary procedure or Robert's rules would require. So, it's a lot of information in a very short time. Anyone have any questions?
And you did it in 1 hour, Clint.
Clint.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Butch Putman from Henderson County. I carry a couple of things that's pretty interesting. It's the pinwheel. I don't know if you can see it or not. That has all the rules and procedures.
Oh yeah.
It's about 14 items. And then, believe it or not, I've had disagreements about what actually in the book. So I've tabbed Webster's volume of the second edition. I'm sure there's a newer edition now, but they're good to have on hand just for references to be.
Oh, definitely. And the latest edition copy of Robert's Rules that I have is the 10th edition. But they come out about every 10 or 15 years. But there can be debate, and you can read those rules, and whoever is reading it will interpret it one way or the other. And that's why it's important for the body to make the decision. And that's the thing, if people don't agree with the chair, the body has the right to decide what is proper or what is not. So
it wasn't being a magistrate was the problem. It was I was a union president for the steelworkers, and so those arguments could get pretty intense sometime about what the rules are. So
yeah, definitely.
So Clint, what we can do is take your cheat sheet and do what Butch does and just keep it handy. Just,
yeah, a lot simpler.
yes, sir. Well,
Like I said, I will send this the cheat sheet and then the presentation to Diane so that she can distribute that to everyone. But I appreciate you all inviting me to spend some time with you today. And I just realized I've been looking off to my other screen, and so the recording probably looks like I'm not even looking at anyone. But if you have any questions, Diane knows how to reach me. I have in the past coached people who are new to presiding officers of organizations, and I'm happy to sit down and have a phone call with someone about what some basic general best practices are. And the best practice is one, to recognize that you don't know everything, and two, to be deliberate and concise and consistent when you're a presiding officer. And if you're those things, then the structure and the format of a meeting will come. So
Clint, we are so appreciative of you, and thank you so much for this. It was a really good experience, and I'm sure I'll speak for the participants because it was so helpful for me, and I learned a lot. So